Although the matrilineal system is the last of the unilineal systems I want to look at, I now want to look at what are known as non-unilineal. In other words, they're not just in one line. These systems, non-unilineal or bilineal systems, have been neglected by anthropologists until fairly recently. There are few of them in the traditional anthropological hunting grounds of Africa and Asia. They're mainly to be found in the Pacific, in Europe and North America, and Japan, and of course England and the rest of Western Europe. They haven't been studied because they're rather difficult to study. It's difficult to study one's own system. The exotic systems of other societies first attracted attention, and then coming back to understand our own took time. They're also difficult to study because whereas the unilineal systems form discrete blocks, matrilineages, this system is much more loose and a network of ties which doesn't have discrete groups, except in the exception I'll talk about. A better way of visualizing these systems is to think of such things as the hub of a wheel, an individual as the hub of a wheel with spokes going out from him, or a network, or dyadic, that is two ends, dyadic ties with people. And it's only with the development of ideas of strands and networks that it's been possible to understand such non-unilineal systems. Also, they're not comparatively very important. They're the minority of societies. Only 40% of human societies have such systems, where we happen to be in Western Europe, one of them. Though, of course, they do include such societies as North America and Western Europe. What are the major features of these non-unilineal systems? As Radcliffe Brown describes it, you have a system where a stock, that is a group of people who think of themselves as related to each other, includes all the descendants of a man and his wife, counting descent through both females and males. In the SIB system, that's as it was often known, based on the Ancestor system, a man belongs to each of the 8 stocks of his 8 pairs of great-grandparents, and all descendants of these ancestors are his kin. Thus, you are related to hundreds, if not thousands, of people, because you're tracing descent through both males and females, and you don't have a bounded set of relatives. Now, there are 2 major forms of such descent systems. Unfortunately, both are represented on the British mainland by the 2 contrasting systems of the English and the Scots. We can distinguish the 2 major forms by the way in which they think of themselves as focusing and being related to each other. That is, their focus. In normal English kinship, the focus of the system, and the one which is common in France or North America, is the ego, that is, I. The system is based upon the network of ties that radiate out, that's why one has an image of a wheel with a hub, that radiate out from any individual through kin of both sexes, and then descend from these ascendants to your kin on either side. As a result, your kin are private to you. The only people who have the same set of kin are brothers and sisters. Your cousins will have a different set, and so on. Whereas in a unilineal system, the lineage, everyone has the same set. They're in a bounded group. So you have a personal kindred who are your relatives, your first cousins, your second cousins, and you carry them around like hubs on a wheel with you. And the next, your children have a different set from you because they are related through their mother and their father. This system can't give rise to permanent groups. No 2 people's kindred are the same, and there are no descent groups, lineages, and so on. This is why we find descent systems which do have groups so strange. Examples of this system, as well as the English, are those among some groups of Eskimos, and they have rather similar kinship terminologies to the English one, and that is why, in fact, our kinship terminology, which is rather like a hub of a wheel, at the center is us, mother, father, son, daughter, and then a wider group, cousins, nephews, nieces, and then wider and wider and wider. Some Eskimos have a similar kinship terminology, and indeed our kinship terminology is known as an Eskimo kinship terminology because it is very similar to that. Other groups which have such an ego-focused, non-unilineal descent system are the Kalingas, some Tibetans, some Lapps. It seems to be particularly people who live in the Antarctic and Arctic regions who have such systems. The other type of non-unilineal descent system is the one where the focus is not on the individual when you're reckoning your kin links, but on your common ancestor. An example of this is the early Scottish sept, which is a form of clan, in which links were traced through both sexes, but from a common ancestor. I was told by my father that I was related closely and intimately with Rob Roy MacGregor. I don't quite know how it worked, but apparently all members of my clan were descended from either Rob Roy or some other ancestor. In this system, you can actually get a group of people on the ground who are related either through males or females back to a particular ancestor. So you have an ancestor-focused system. And what you do in practice, as anthropologists have discovered, is that when you're thinking about who you're related, you don't work out for it from yourself. But in Irish kinship studies, it's been shown that you go back to 4 or 5 generations. You think of, well, that was my ancestor. Now, he had 4 sons, and each of those sons had the following children, and then they had the following children. And then, when you want to know how you are related to someone down the road, you know that you go back and trace down the descent like that. Now, holding it in the mind like that means that you can hold hundreds of relatives in your mind as being related, and you know the precise genealogical links. Our system is very good as a loose system, but it'll only hold a few people in your mind, and you probably won't know how your 2nd, 3rd, 4th cousins are related to you. So in the ancestor-focused system, you have clan structures, and such systems have been discovered not only in Scotland, but also, for example, in a famous island study, the Tikapia, studied by Raymond Firth in the Pacific, or the Iban of Borneo, studied by Freeman and others. You find ancestor-focused, non-unilineal descent systems.